All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We are tracing a single, massive story battling chaos across centuries of ancient texts. We're looking at the grand narrative of biblical literature, pulling directly from a series of really comprehensive textual analyses. And what we'll see is that these are definitely not just disconnected stories. They actually form this continuous, incredibly complex epic about humanity's struggle with disorder, our catastrophic failures to fix it on our own, and a deeply surprising, ultimately restorative divine rescue plan. Today, we're going to break this down into four key parts: chaos, creation, and rebellion. Then, the rescue mission. Next, the mystery of suffering. And finally, we'll wrap up with the Lamb and restoration. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1, Chaos, Creation, and Rebellion, looking specifically at Genesis chapters 1 through 11. Now, our sources highlight this absolutely fascinating philosophical contrast between two key Hebrew words found in these texts. First, we have ruach, which translates to the spirit, breath, or energy of God. It's this invisible but super powerful force, kind of like the wind, that hovers over the initial dark chaos to create life and order. But in stark contrast to that, later wisdom literature introduces us to the word hevel, literally meaning smoke or vapor. It perfectly describes the unpredictable, totally uncontrollable, and frankly confusing nature of human life. It is the chaotic reality we actually live in. So the big question is, how did we get from the perfect order of ruach to the absolute mess of hevel? Well, that brings us straight to the rebellion. Humans were placed as divine representatives to cultivate order, and they were given a choice, symbolized by the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They essentially had to decide, are we going to trust God's definition of good and evil, or seize autonomy and define it for ourselves? Spoiler alert, they went with autonomy. Instead of trusting divine wisdom, humans grabbed control, and that unleashed a massive ripple effect of Hevel. This rebellion immediately fractured relationships. I mean, Adam and Eve literally hid from each other and from God. And from there, the sources trace this rapid, tragic downward spiral into violence. You go from Cain murdering his brother Abel to Lamech boasting about violent vengeance, eventually culminating in the ultimate symbol of human arrogance, the city of Babylon, where humanity basically tried to build a tower to the heavens just to make a name for themselves. Moving right along to Section 2, the rescue mission, God's rescue plan. So out of the scattered, arrogant chaos of Babylon, the texts zero in on just one guy, Abraham. God commits to blessing all nations through this one, let's be honest here, entirely flawed family. They fail over and over again. Abraham lies about his wife, Jacob cheats his brother, Joseph's brothers literally sell him into slavery. Yet the divine faithfulness persists, constantly subverting human evil to preserve life. This baton passes over the generations, finally landing 400 years later with Moses in Egypt, where that original family has grown into the entirely enslaved nation of Israel. And this perfectly sets up the ultimate clash of kingdoms in the book of Exodus. On one side, you have Pharaoh's kingdom, which is framed as this new Babylon, where humanity's rebellion has gone so far that murdering innocent Israelite infants is actually seen as a positive political strategy. It's brutal. On the other side, you have God's kingdom, actively working to reverse this evil and liberate the slaves. The climax of this entire rescue is the Passover, where God provides a means of escape from judgment through the blood of a perfect, sacrificed lamb. Keep that in mind, because that is a powerful symbol we are absolutely going to see return at the very end of this narrative. Now, after escaping Egypt, the Israelites have to actually enter the Promised Land. But entering this land wasn't about ethnic favoritism or having the biggest military. It was strictly a divine battle. The contrast here is super stark. Look at the Battle of Jericho. It required completely passive trust. They literally just marched around with music, and the result was a miraculous victory. But right after that, at the Battle of Ai, an Israelite named Achan disobeys by stealing devoted items. The result? A humiliating defeat. The texts use this strict contrast to drive home the point that victory requires absolute obedience and trust in divine command, not human strength. Which brings us to Section 3, the mystery of suffering, Job and Ecclesiastes. Now, within the Bible's wisdom literature, we hit this really jarring contrast. On one hand, Proverbs presents a worldview where karma makes total logical sense. Good, wise actions yield good results, and bad actions bring punishment. It's clean and predictable. But then you read Ecclesiastes and Job, and they present the harsh, unfiltered reality of our hevel existence. Ecclesiastes observes a major glitch in the system. The race doesn't always go to the swift, and random chance happens to everyone. Job takes it even further, showing that entirely innocent, genuinely good people can suffer absolute devastation. And this leads us to a massive, profound philosophical pivot. The source text tells us Job was a completely blameless man, yet he loses his family, his wealth, and his health, all because an angelic accuser challenges God's reward system. Job's friends show up and insist he must have sinned to deserve this, basically applying that strict Proverbs worldview. But Job knows he's innocent, and he literally demands an explanation from God. He is questioning how God actually runs the world if justice isn't always immediate and obvious. But when God finally answers Job, he doesn't explain the heavenly wager, and he doesn't give a direct answer for the suffering. Instead, God takes Job on this epic virtual tour of the cosmos. He shows Job all the intricate, mind-blowing details of the universe and highlights these fantastic, wild creatures like the behemoth and leviathan. These animals represent that the world is incredibly beautiful and good, but it's also untamed and, sometimes dangerous. The core point the text is making here is that human perspective is infinitely too small to micromanage the universe or to judge divine justice. Job is left totally humbled, realizing he just has to trust in a divine wisdom that is way too complex for him to fully wrap his head around. All right, on to our final part, Section 4, the Lamb and Restoration, Isaiah and Revelation. So with humanity still struggling to navigate this complex world of suffering, we reach the climax of the rescue mission. Because even after Israel gets the Promised Land, they fail, just like everyone else. Through the prophet Isaiah, we learn that Israel's corruption and idolatry are going to bring severe judgment, specifically their ultimate exile back to Babylon. But Isaiah pairs this heavy warning with an incredibly profound promise. God's ultimate plan is to send a holy seed, a messianic king, from the line of David. This king, called Emmanuel, will be empowered by the Spirit to bring justice to the poor, transform all creation, and establish universal peace. Fast forward to the really vivid apocalyptic visions in the book of Revelation. The author John sees a scroll sealed with 7 seals, which represents God's final plan to bring his kingdom to earth. And the massive question echoing in the heavenly throne room, deciding humanity's fate, is this: who actually has the authority to open the scroll? Who is worthy to finally defeat the chaos? And guys, here is the ultimate plot twist of the entire biblical narrative. John experiences this huge disconnect between what he hears and what he sees. Auditory expectation. He is told that the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah has triumphed and can open the scroll, right? So you expect this violent military king. But when he turns to look, the visual reality is completely shocking. He sees a slain, bleeding lamb standing by the throne. The ultimate victory over the beast and the chaos of the world isn't won by a violent lion at all. It's won by a sacrificial lamb. Let's walk through how this restorative plan actually plays out in Revelation, because it's completely countercultural. Step 1. The Messianic King, Jesus, conquers evil not by killing his enemies, but by dying for them as the ultimate Passover lamb. Step 2. His followers, the church, act as prophetic witnesses. They conquer by embracing this exact same sacrificial love, even to the point of martyrdom. Step 3. The text reveals that divine judgment alone didn't change hearts. We saw that with Pharaoh in Exodus. It is the visible mercy and sacrificial love of God's people that finally leads the rebellious nations to repentance. And finally, step 4. Through all of this, God restores order, completely merging heaven and earth into a new creation free from chaos. So looking at this massive, unified epic from the dark waters of Genesis all the way to the new creation in Revelation, this source material presents a huge argument about human autonomy versus divine wisdom. The crucial question to ask yourself today is this: in a world that is undeniably filled with the unpredictable smoke and vapor of Hevel, how will you choose to navigate the chaos? Are you going to try to seize control on your own terms, or will you trust the incredibly counterintuitive sacrificial wisdom presented in these ancient texts?